And West Ham have moved into the top half by virtue of that victory tonight. Bournemouth find themselves 4 points clear of the bottom three, almost a third through the season. But it is so tight. David Moyes referenced it in his interview with us, Sean. Are we talking about all these clubs right here being in a relegation battle?
Well, it's early for that kind of talk, I think, but it's an unusual situation, or for the last few years, I think that's right. You know, normally you'd have the bottom 2, 3, 4 maybe, sort of edging away, then that middle group and then the top group, and that seems there's a big split so far. So it'll be interesting to see this year how it's going to pan out.
What do you think, Jamie?
I mean, yeah, you talk about them all being a relegation fight. I mean, you look at certainly two of the teams, not just because they're in the bottom three, there will be questions asked on the back of the result of the weekend. Jesse Marsch looks like he's obviously under pressure from the Leeds fans. Wolves, I think it's an interesting one. They've obviously went for Mick Beale at QPR, hasn't happened, and they've put Steve Davis in charge, I think they said, till 2023. It's just interesting, the dynamic of other teams changing, getting a decent result. What actually goes into the head of the Wolves board then? Does it almost, I mean, Sean, you may know better than me, would that create a panic because you're actually looking at what other clubs are doing as well with their managers?
Well, I probably wouldn't know better than you because I was in there for a long time. So, you know, mostly with a board who were pretty stable because, as I said about David Moyes, you earn the right. You know, they earn the right to trust you and to believe in you. Usually it's a tough one. I think clubs are looking for that impetus, that reaction rather, if they do change managers. You know, others, they might look and say, no, it looks like Steve Cooper. They've said, no, you're staying and we want you to keep, you know, doing what you do. I think it's a really tough one because, and then the psychological hit of it. You know, I came out at Burnley, they get a bump and then it flatlines, you know, and so how do you measure that? You know, how do you measure what's right and wrong? I think it's very difficult for ownerships now. I really do, because the demand on change is getting greater and greater.
Well, obviously, when you were in the Burnley job, so often, me and Gary would be sat here, we'd be looking at things like that, and sometimes you'd be in the bottom three or you'd be bottom of the league, and we still never thought that you would go down. That's a different sort of subject, but there was never any of that panic around Burnley, whereas other clubs, I just mentioned before about West Ham, you know, probably never normally down there so often, but there was almost not a relaxation, but there wasn't that panic at Burnley when you were there. There was always
this experience, is that what you mean?
Yeah, the experience, the feeling that what you do eventually will work out and you'll get yourself out of those positions.
Yeah, but you learn to manage the noise as well. You know, you've got to manage that bit, that's the key.
From Neville.
You said it. No, you learn to manage the noise about what it is. You know, you're a Premier League football manager, there is going to be noise if you're not winning games. And so you have to handle that as a manager, not just the bit on the pitch, that whole feel of it. The club maybe have to understand that, where you're at. That was a fortunate thing at Burnley, particularly the older boys that worked with me for longer. They weren't, even when we finished 7th, they weren't kind of going, right, we want you to finish 6th the next year. They were kind of going, look, we get it, we get the challenges. Different clubs now have different viewpoints, and I think, like I say, the ownership is so important. You know, the ownership of a club can be really riggy, really wanting change very quickly. They listen to the fans and the noise, or some just say, no, we're going to sit tight. And rights and wrongs are about getting the results, what everyone wants, and being in the Premier League.